my hair is doing this thing where it's at this length, and then I'm also working on getting the red out. So it's this color. I think it looks cute. It's an in-between stage right now. We're rolling with it. Hi, hey, I'm Morgan, and today I'm going to be going over my January wrap-up. January was something. We're going to pretend that it's not the middle of February. January was wild. Both in my reading and my personal life, January was something. I started my new job in January and was catapulted into working 40 hours a week. I slept more than I read and filmed. I did manage to read 5 books though, and that's what we're here to talk about, and I'm really jazzed about it. I am going to go over my stats for the month, and then I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in more detail. In the month of January, I read a total of 5 books, and that amounted to a total of 1,178 pages. I had a hodgepodge of ratings this month that averaged out to 3.2 stars. 3 of the books I read were physical, while 2 of them were listened to on audiobook. All but 1 I owned. The last one I borrowed from the library. And that's cool. So in typical MorgyyReads fashion, I'm going to be doing mini reviews of each of these books, starting with the book I rated the lowest, working my way up to the highest rated. So the first book I'm going to be talking about is my lowest rated book of the month. It's one I just did not like. I listened to it on audiobook. It was nonfiction, and that is The Wondering Years: How Pulp Culture Helped Me Answer Life's Biggest Questions. This is by Knox, McCoy, and I rated it 2 stars. So, listen, I love pop culture. I love making references to movies and television shows and books and music that I have grown up with. It's like my shit. When I saw the cover of this book, when I saw the title of this book, I was stoked. I was so elated to listen to a book about a guy that watched The Wonder Years a lot and learned a lot about life from it. And what I got was lies. What I received was a book about a guy who just wanted to talk about Jesus, and he made 2 movie references. Disclaimer, I don't have any issue with religious undertones. I don't have issue with anyone talking about their faith. It's the fact that I was blindsided by it. I was led to believe that this was more about pop culture and a quippy anecdotal book about someone's life while also referencing pop culture. I was expecting him to fall down a flight of stairs and be like, it's like that episode of Full House. That's what I was expecting, and it wasn't that. This book is basically reminiscent of my childhood when I would stay the night at a friend's house on a Saturday, and we would stay up all night and eat a bunch of pizza and drink a bunch of soda and watch movies and talk about stuff and play with Bratz dolls, and we'd go to bed and it'd be super fun, and then we'd be woken up at 8 in the morning by their mom, and the first thing I'd hear is, all right, we gotta get ready for church. And my ass only packed jeans and a hoodie and some sweatpants to sleep in. It's you're having a good time and you're talking about funny things and you're joking around and having a good time, and then you find out that you're getting taken to church in the morning and you had no idea that this was happening. This was never previously discussed. It wasn't something that was even vaguely mentioned, and you're just blindsided and you feel cheated out of a fun, wholesome weekend. And that's what this book felt like. I was not expecting it to get as Jesus-y as it did. And that's fine. Just be very, I just wish it was more forthright about the intention, because it felt like an underhand thing, ooh yeah, I'm gonna get him to think that this is gonna be about pop culture. There are barely any pop culture references in this book. He makes 5, 6. That's about it. The rest of it is all about Jesus. And there is a point in this book where this man talks about his father being diagnosed with cancer and then equates that to the fact that dinosaurs aren't discussed in the Bible, it just felt like evangelical preaching disguised as being like cool and quirky and hip with the kids. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. That's it. If it had just said like how I got through my faith and how I became like a saved Christian man, like if that was forthright and if that was directly stated, I would have enjoyed this book a lot more. But it wasn't. It was hidden underneath like a guise of being about pop culture and helping him shape his life, and it wasn't that at all. I felt misled and lied to, and the intention of this book feels very off, and I'm not a fan. The next book I'm going to be talking about, I rated 2.5 stars. It was also nonfiction. It was also one I listened to on audiobook, and that is Unfuck Yourself by Gary John Bishop. I rated this 2.5 stars not because the subject matter is anything like bad. It was an average book, so I gave it an average rating. This is a self-help book about eliminating negative self-talk and like basically shifting your mindset for yourself and your life to propel yourself forward, as opposed to staying trapped in your head of like negative self-doubt and self-talk and things like that, which like I already know a lot about. So none of the stuff in this book was groundbreaking information to me. And also I rated this book 2.5 stars because mental illness is not even like looked at all. Like some people can't just wake up and be like, man, I get to go to work today. Like some people have depression and some people have borderline personality disorders or schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder, and some people can't just like get out of their head and step into themselves super easily, and that wasn't even touched on, and it felt like this book was just erasing people with mental illness, which I didn't like. Also, it was very repetitive. This book was super repetitive, which I didn't really care for. Like, it was just him saying the same thing over and over and over again, just worded differently every time. And that was frustrating. If you're really into like self-help type books, give it a try, give it a listen. It's not anything that I didn't already know going in. So it's not like I found this book heavily groundbreaking or anything like that, but I think some people that don't know this information and don't know this kind of mindset shift like would find this book supportive for them. I just didn't, and that's fine. The next book I'm going to talk about was one that I read for my book club, the Hot Mess Book Club. It's one that I didn't hate, but I also didn't love. It's kind of meh for me. That is What If It's Us. This is by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. I rated this 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm starting to realize about myself and about my reading taste that I am not the biggest fan of Becky Albertalli's writing style. I find her writing to be like sickeningly sweet, like too sweet at all. This book follows our two characters, Ben and Arthur. Ben is going to the post office to mail a box of all of his ex-boyfriend's things after their breakup, and that is where he and Arthur meet. They have like a meet cute. Then they're separated and they don't ask for each other's phone numbers. They don't have any other means of contacting one another, but the universe keeps pulling them back together in an assortment of ways, and they're like, man, what if we're meant to be together? Like, this takes place in New York City as well. Arthur is from Georgia, because what Becky Albertalli characters aren't from Georgia. Arthur is only there for the summer. So this is a queer book. We have some queer rep in here. Ben and Arthur are both gay. Ben is also Puerto Rican. Arthur's perspective is written by Becky Albertalli and Ben's perspective is written by Adam Silvera. So I'm just gonna say right now that I loved Ben so much. Ben's character was absolutely phenomenal, and his development and the way that his voice is perfect, and I love him. He has such real life issues, like socioeconomically, like his parents live in a lower income area. He is attending summer school because, you know, his grades are lacking. Ben is so much more real to me. Like, there's just something about Ben's character that I find so endearing and so real. And the gay Puerto Rican rep, his own voices, to Adam Silvera. I think if Becky's intention was to write the most stereotypically dramatic gay teenage boy with Arthur, she did a phenomenal job. Like, if that was her intention, she did great, because Arthur is so extra and so dramatic. I found a lot of aspects of this book like very forgettable. I found certain things that Arthur said problematic, and he never really showed any sort of apology or remorse for the things that he says and does and the way that he behaves, whereas Ben has a lot of remorse. Adam's raw writing and the way that he writes so realistically really helps cut the sweetness of Becky's. Like, if this book was fully written by Becky Albertalli, I would have DNF'd it halfway through. I truly felt more connected to Adam's storytelling than Becky's. I feel a lot more like realistic qualities and traits coming from Adam's characters than I do Becky's. Like, I feel like all of Becky's characters are just perfect. Like, she writes them perfectly, and they have flaws, but they never really acknowledge their flaws, and that's something that irks me. I did really enjoy it. It was really cute. It was funny. I did like the way that they ended this on the note that they did. I love seeing like a friends to lovers, and I also see like a lovers back to friends like after a breakup. Like, I think that is a really nice thing to look at. If it had been fully written by Adam Silvera, I would have given it 5 stars. But I really only liked half of it, so I docked it down to 3.5 because there were issues I found with it, and I thought it was a little too long. I felt there were parts where it just like dragged. It was a little bit too hefty in my opinion for a young adult contemporary. It was kind of hard for me to really be connected to the story because I felt taken out of it every time it switched back and forth because I knew who was writing what. This was my most anticipated release of 2018, and it fell pretty flat for me, and I'm really disappointed. Yeah, but I did a little bit of annotating, which was fun. But yeah, not my favorite. The next one that I'm going to be talking about is a graphic novel, and that is Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Promise Part 1. This is by Luen-Yang. I gave this 4 stars. I woke up one day in January and I said, you know what I fucking want to do? Read every single Avatar: The Last Airbender comic in publication order, and that's what I started in January. This takes place right after the show ends. This follows a Fire Nation colony that is inside the like capital of the Earth Nation, and Aang is trying to move the Fire Nation colony out of there to keep the peace restored, but it's causing a little bit of conflict, especially between Aang and Zuko, who is now the Fire Lord. This was really fun. I gave it 4 stars, which is pretty much like my standard for graphic novels that I enjoy. I loved being able to be back with these characters. I absolutely adore Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I really want to read the Legend of Korra comics, so it only felt right to read all of the ATLA comics, and I'm really excited to be reading this. And the last book that I'm going to be talking about was ironically like one of the first books that I read in January, and that was In an Absent Dream by Seanan McGuire, and I also rated this 4 out of 5 stars, but I feel like if I reread it, I would give it like a 4.5 or a 5 star. I adore this series so much. This is the 4th installment in the Wayward Children series, and it follows Lundy, who we meet in the very first book, Every Heart a Doorway. This is a door story, so this follows Lundy when she goes through her door and what world she experiences, and she goes to a goblin market, and it's a world of high logic, and everything is based on fair value and things being fair, and I absolutely adored this. I think of the door stories, this is one of my favorites, and I think of the books, this is like pretty high up there. I think what kept me from rating this a 5 star upon my first read was that it felt kind of rushed, and I felt like I was introduced to characters and then they were taken away, and I was made to feel like I was supposed to care more than I really did. But other than that, I really enjoyed this book. I cannot wait for book 5, and I have to wait until next January for it to come out. I'm just so jazzed to have read this and to be experiencing this story. If you don't know, this is the Wayward Children series, and it follows like portal fantasies. Children find themselves going through doorways and finding themselves in amazing, extraordinary places that feel perfect to them, and then there's a point where they go back to reality and they don't know how to readjust to the mundane and to the mediocrity that was their life after going somewhere so extraordinary. So they find themselves typically, from what we've seen, at this boarding school called Eleanor West Home for Wayward Children, which is meant to reacclimate them to the world and adjust them to their lives after coming back from this world that they didn't even want to leave in the first place. And it's amazing. It's so good. I love this series. But you guys, there you have it. That was my January wrap-up. It was a nice, short, sweet little one. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up if you feel so inclined. Definitely leave me comments letting me know what you read in the month of January, what your favorite book of the month was, what your least favorite book of the month was, because talking to you guys is my absolute favorite thing in the world. And if you'd like to see more of my content and more of my mug, you are more than welcome to subscribe. I upload every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And like I said, my name is Morgan. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and happy reading. Okay, bye!